Ron Boone made me do it, and we rewatched the first half. And if the vets don't play well, the kids really don't have a chance. It's next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. Today on Locked on Jazz, we'll break down what happened in the first half. Quite frankly, John Collins and Jordan Clarkson weren't good. Why? I don't know. Maybe the moment was bigger than we realized. The Jazz have changed Lauri Markkanen's rotation, and it might not be having a very good impact. We'll look at that. And did we see the model for Taylor Hendricks' development last night in Jalen Johnson? We'll talk about all those things on today's edition of Locked on Jazz as we come to you from Orlando. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps as well as on YouTube. Please give us a 5-star review if you have a moment. Leave comments. Thumbs up on YouTube really matter. So please do. The irony, if you're watching on YouTube right there, I have a Disney World green screen behind me and my thumb didn't appear. Like I just did it and actually did thumbs up without a thumb. They cuts off my thumb. And to the everydayers, you're the best. Thanks so much for tuning in each and every day and being a part of the program. Thanks to the various emails I got yesterday about our open of yesterday's show. I always love those. Thanks for taking the moment. It's just so nice. If you take a minute, like I probably don't do a great job of always responding. I do read all of them, and I just always am kind of blown away that someone takes the moments to be able to take a second to send that email. So thank you very much. It was really insightful, interesting comments. Makes me actually want to change the way I open my broadcast, but we're not there yet. Today's show is brought to you in part by FanDuel. FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On. Also, the number one sports book in America. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with all winning $5 bets and $150 if your bet wins. FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. All right. Here's what happened last night. We got beat badly by Atlanta. And I'll just be honest. Like, John Collins and Jordan Clarkson weren't very good. Like, it happens. They're humans. There was a lot going on, I think, for both of them. I think Jordan really wanted to play well because of Quinn. John, I spent time with John in interviews before the day in the elevator. He had just so much nervous energy. He was trying to convince himself that he had the most emotions he was possibly going to have while walking into the arena for practice because it came from the other side. Now, weird it was, and you just knew that wasn't true. And then obviously it was in tears, moved emotionally, and honestly, he was just a mess, like on the floor, and it happens. And then Jordan, we'll just walk through John, by the way. And I kind of give him a pass. I have no idea what it's like to come back to play after 6 years in a town. And John's, I think we learned a little about John. Like, he cares. He's a caring guy. I think that I like that. Like, he's invested. It matters to him. He cares what people think. To me, that, like, we learned a good thing about John Collins last night while he played really bad basketball. The opening play, we end up down 12-0. When you end up down 12-0, it's pretty hard to come back. The opening play of the game is supposed to be a lob to John Collins. It doesn't materialize. Collins doesn't get the pick high enough. It just doesn't happen. It ends up with a Taylor Hendricks 3, and we miss. Then we get a nice turnover right away, and Colin Sexton bypasses a wide open 3 to try to get John Collins a 3. Like, it's clear the guys know everything that's going on. It's actually a nice sign they care about each other. They're trying to get him a 3. But since January 1st, Colin Sexton's shooting 42% from 3. And John Collins is shooting 28% from 3. I don't want Colin Sexton bypassing a 3 for John Collins. I got it. I love it. It's great teammates. Bad basketball. He misses. Markkanen misses a 3, which I don't really remember on how it happened. And then Sexton misses a 3 on a play. And then we just get into this weird thing. John Collins turns it over. Collins travels on a play where he's driving the basket, and John Collins has cut right into his driving lane and completely blown up the play. Like, John's supposed to cut, but not then. Like, he cut way too early, I think, from my understanding of our offense. And so Collins gets in the middle lane and travels. Then John misses a corner three. Then John turns it over. Then John turns it over. Then John turns it over again. My gosh. And it's 12-0 at that point. Like, what are you going to do? And then Jordan really was pretty terrible in the first half. Like, I'm not trying to beat up on him, but he missed Taylor Hendricks, Bryce Sensabaugh, and Keontae George twice on wide open passes in the lane. Now, interestingly enough, all of them would have either been jump passes over the top or left-hand passes. And maybe Jordan doesn't throw a left-hand pass. I don't know that. But it is a little bit of theory in this league that one of the reasons you want to push guys to their offhand is because you'd like to force them into making passes with their left hand because they don't do that well. And then the other thing on Jordan, at some point here, I love the flamethrower that Thurl and Bowler and everybody have created. But at some point here, we're going to have to add in some self-awareness. So I think Jordan is now shooting below 30% for the season from three. At which point, the pull-up transition three at 30%, and I get it. I love the confidence in believing that you're not a 30% three-point shooter and it's all going to come back. And so maybe I'm wrong here because then you're just quelling somebody's juice. But I other than Jordan Poole at 5 threes a game at 29.7%, that's pretty much the worst shooter in the NBA right now. It's unfortunate. He just hasn't found his groove recently. And it's worse on the road. It's 21 or 22% on the road. And like the off the bounce three, and maybe I'm totally unfair right here, but the heavily contested off the bounce three on off a pick on the right wing, which is one of the shots he took, just seems to me to be too tough a shot. Again, a little bit garbage. I sit here and talk into a microphone and I don't play the game. And so I don't quite understand, like, well, if you take that away from him, are you just generally taking away maybe. And like, if you're going to have Jordan play, let him play. That really might be the truth. And so I might be wrong here on it, but we're like, and honestly, if we decide Jordan's a 29% three-point shooter, then at some point you just decide, like, that's cutting off his, like, then he's just not, I don't know. But he's 25.6% on off the bounce threes this year. 25.6%. Like, if you're going to get yourself going again, let's do it on something other than that. And driving in the lane, let's get the pass to the corner. Let's get that pass to the corner. I mean, he left Keontae twice, Taylor once, and Bryce wide open. Bryce was on a strong side play. It was right there. So my point of this is not to beat up John Collins and Jordan Clarkson. I think there was a lot going on last night. I think there was a lot of emotion. I think we're humans dealing with humans. The thing is that if those guys don't play well, and Lauri's not playing particularly well, then Keontae, Taylor, and Bryce just don't have much of a shot. Like, they need that support. It's actually the best argument I could give against tanking and why you don't just blow out your roster and do what Houston did for the last few years before they added Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks is that if you have just no semblance of structure and order around your guys, they can't play well. They need to have the burden relieved on them. Like, the best sequence we had of the night was Keontae got hot and hit like 2 shots in a row, which isn't really playing. It's just getting hot. And then I saw Keontae like try to carry it for a little bit. Like, that's a lot. So we really need, in the next 20 whatever games, the veterans to play well. John and Jordan have a track record of generally playing better than they did last night, and I just think there was a lot to last night. But it was, and so I wouldn't be one that's kind of throwing it on those guys for that. But I would say, like, I thought last night was a really good reminder of how important it is to have good, solid, veteran, stable play around your young guys to allow them to be able to prosper. That's the thesis statement here. Is not Jordan Clarkson and John Collins cost us a game in Atlanta. Like, kind of who cares? Maybe true, but kind of who cares? What is interesting is that John Collins and Jordan Clarkson need to play well, as does Lauri Markkanen, as does Colin Sexton, so that Keontae George, Taylor Hendricks, and Bryce Sensabaugh can have successful outings and improve over the next 20 whatever games to be able to become better players. That's maybe obvious, but last night really glaring that there's not much they can do under that circumstance. All right. Jazz changed Lauri Markkanen's rotations on February 14th. It makes sense on paper. It might be having a negative impact on Lauri, and I wonder whether it might change. We'll talk about that as we're just getting started here on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. The Chevy line of trucks. I mean, that's Americana, right? That is the Silverado and the Colorado. There's nothing quite like the Chevy lineup of trucks. The Silverado is big and burly, and you're sitting in it. You feel like you got the world at your hands. And the Colorado's the smaller, zippier utility truck. It's the perfect lineup of trucks, and Murdoch Chevy has it for you in Woods Cross, also in Logan. The SUV lineup, well, we know about the Utah County assault vehicles, the Suburban and the Tahoe, but don't miss out on the Blazer and the Trailblazer, all the way down to the Trax. The Equinox is in there as well. It's the lineup of great cars from Murdoch Chevy, and the Murdoch family's been in Utah for over 80 years, giving you the no-regret service. So if you're looking for a truck or you're looking for a great SUV, do it over at Chevy, at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross or in Logan. Jump aboard and send me an email at dlock09@gmail.com so that we can get you set up in your Murdoch Chevy today. Today's show is also brought to you by Stitch Fix. This is so fun. All right, if you're like me, I do care what I look like, despite the fact that I look ridiculous every day that I do this show with you. And I do like to be a little bit in style, kind of. I'll go with personality over style sometimes, hopefully. Not always. But this is how, but I don't have time for this. So at Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget, and they do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe and stay current. So you easily upgrade your wardrobe because the stylist finds you new on-trend favorites that will work, and they give you, you've done it, like you've talked to them, blah, 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 worked it through, and they then send you a box of 5 just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations, pro styling advice. It's all great. The stylist adds the just right pieces. They learn what you like and don't like through that. It's pretty fabulous. It's a nice way to not have to do the shopping, not have to get stuck. Like, am I cool with this? Is this cool? Is this in? Is this not right? Is this wrong? Yeah, I'm 53 and still worry about that crap. Style, it makes you feel good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. stitchfix.com/lockedon. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. Thank you. 5-star reviews, much appreciated. Thumbs up on YouTube, much appreciated. Thank you very much. When you're done with this, we'll send you the first, if you're on YouTube, for the first ever 24/7 national sports channel called Locked On Sports Today. It's also available now on Amazon Fire TV, so check it out. It's kind of cool. I have it up in the hotel room right now. All right. This is interesting. On February 14th against the Lakers, the Jazz changed Lauri's rotation 5 games ago. So Lauri had been playing generally, not always, most of the first quarter. He would play sometimes 12 minutes, sometimes 9, sometimes 10, and then he would come back for a second stint. The Jazz changed Lauri into 3 stints. Not entirely sure why. I was looking at it, trying to figure it out. The first game they did it, he matched. Walker started with John Collins, and then they had him match John Collins after that. But then they got rid of then they started Taylor after that. So it's not clear to me necessarily. But so the way they've done it is that Lauri is now playing 3 stints. He plays the first 5 minutes, 6 minutes, call it. He sits for a very short period of time, about a minute and a half. He then comes back and plays the final 3 or 4 minutes of the first quarter and and the first 4 minutes of the second quarter in an extended 8-minute stretch. And then he comes back and plays the final 3 or 4 minutes of the quarter. And by the time you're done with it, it comes out the same. So that was against the Lakers. Our next game was against Charlotte. And we did it again. He played the opening 6 minutes. We were +7 in that stretch. He then comes back for this extended stretch that leads the first to the second quarter, which is great because he gets a break in the middle. And so the only thought I have is that maybe they figured out that Lauri plays better in shorter bursts without fatigue. Now, in the Charlotte game, they actually changed it in the second half and went back to a little bit, interestingly, because Lauri in that game, Lauri played the first 6 minutes and then he came back. He didn't come back for a little longer, and then he played the final 13. So in the second half of the Charlotte game, they kind of altered it. Then in the Spurs game, Lauri went back to the 3 stints again, but again in the second half they altered it, and then the game was a blowout, so he didn't close the game. But he ended up playing about 12 straight minutes in the second half. But the first half was 3 stints again. And then last night, they did it again. I believe I should double check that. I don't have my popcorn.net to pull up, but I do remember kind of seeing it happen last night. So last night we had, obviously the 12-0 stretch that did not start the game well. And then Lauri comes back, goes out at should have been about the 6-minute mark. Let's see. Lauri goes out at the 6:12 mark and then comes back shortly thereafter at the 3:09 mark. So 3 minutes, and then plays and does the same thing. I don't know if these are related, but since they've done this, Lauri's really struggled. Lauri's shooting 37% from the field and 32% from 3 in the 5 games since they've changed his rotation. And in the first half of games, he's playing 16 minutes. In the second half, he's playing 16. I mean, they've done this very well to get 32 minutes out of him, and they're trying to do it in shorter stints, and maybe the feeling is that would be better for him. Get him against some second-team guys. Quinn did this with Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley and dominated the world by doing this. He's shooting in the first quarters when he plays those 2 stints, 41% and 33% from 3. In the second quarter, when he's in an extended against second-team guys, he's not shooting very well, 37% and 12% from 3. And in the third quarters, which have not been totally consistent, remember, because he played out extended a little bit more, and then they've done it, he's shooting 20% from the field and 20% from 3. So, and the fourth quarters are better. His second half numbers are actually 34% shooting overall. His first half numbers are shooting 39. I think he might just be in a slump, worn out, tired. Since the trade deadline, since Simone got traded and Kelly got traded, he has not been as efficient. It might just be that. Like, he's playing with different guys. Taylor's now setting the down screen, probably not as well as Simone did. Like some just little subtle things like that. But they did change his rotation, and since they changed his rotation, he has not been as efficient. And I don't know if they're related at all. And so it's an interesting question of whether or not we'll see, just something for you to watch, is do the Jazz stay with that rotation or do the Jazz change it here in some way coming up? Will we see Lauri go back to playing 8-9 straight minutes? Now, I was trying to look at it and figure out what the Jazz are gaining here a little bit. One is Lauri plays with Walker in his second stint the entire time. And then Lauri, and maybe that's why he's not shooting as well, because our offense is never as good there. And then he comes back and he plays with John again. So that's one possibility, but he doesn't play with John much in that last sequence. The lineup that Lauri is kind of playing in the middle of the game with is Chris Dunn, Jordan Clarkson, Walker Kessler, and Bryce Sensabaugh. Well, Chris is kind of still a non-shooter, though he shot the three well this year. And Walker's obviously a non-shooter, so that's pretty crowded. And I wonder if that relates to the not shooting as well in the early parts of second quarters over the last 5 games. And then Bryce is still learning and probably not particularly well respected. But he's on the floor with Jordan, which should be like, I don't necessarily know whether or not there's used to be an impact stat that the NBA allowed us to look at, like how a player played when he's on the floor with someone. And I believe that number is now that those stats are gone. But it would be interesting to know how Lauri plays with Jordan versus playing with Colin, and whether there's anything that one of them gives him more. I mean, they're very similar players, right? That one of them gives them more in some way or another. I can look at the lineup data, but that's not the same thing as how Lauri looks. So anyway, it's just worth keeping an eye on. Like Lauri's suddenly not playing as well and shooting as well. And I just talked about how we need the veterans to play really well. Lauri had a very quiet night last night. His streak of 3-point shots made came to an end. And he has struggled since they made the rotation change. And is it causation or correlation? I honestly don't know and don't want to make some like outlandish comment. It would be easy to make the outlandish comment. Jazz coaches have changed the rotation and Lauri Markkanen is struggling because of it. Not enough real data to show me that. But I do think it's worth keeping an eye on and seeing whether the Jazz change that at all. By the way, I did mention that lineup data. I looked at it. So the Jazz with Lauri and Colin on the floor together offensively are in the 96th percentile offensively. We're pretty darn good when those two are on the floor together. We're in the 96th percentile. That is with Jordan could be on or off. When it's 94th percentile when Jordan's off the floor. You flip it and put Jordan on with Lauri and Colin off the floor. By the way, the defense is horrendous in that time period, but our defense hasn't been that very good this year. I mean, it's like in the 6th percentile. If you put the Lauri and Jordan on together, we're in the 47th percentile offensively. We're much better defensively. So, yes, Lauri and Colin offensively are much better than Lauri and Jordan are offensively together. Now, we could also now take the next step, which is go look at John and Walker and what their impact is, because Walker has generally stymied offense with lack of spacing, and John has generally helped offense with spacing, not always. But at least that's the theory. So we could dig a little deeper into that, but it's, and Ochai was on there for a little while, who was not much of a spacer, so we'll see. The lineup I talked about, Chris Dunn, Jordan Clarkson, Bryce Sensabaugh, Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler have played 72 minutes together and are minus 33 per 100 possessions. So that lineup is not working as well. And that's probably the biggest change since the trade deadline, is that's when Kelly and Ochai and some of those guys were on the floor and we were making inroads instead of getting beat, because we were playing 240 minutes and don't quite have that right now. All right. Is Jalen Johnson a model that we should watch for Taylor Hendricks, or is it a Kongu of Atlanta? Two interesting players yesterday that we saw as we try to figure out what the Jazz have with the young, talented Taylor Hendricks here. We'll continue to talk about it as we continue on Locked on Jazz. Today's edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you in part by our friends over at BetterHelp. In fact, they will actually officially bring you the next segment. So convenient, flexible online therapy. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. To me, therapy is performance enhancing. That's trying to figure out where you've gotten like some hiccups along the way, whether it's personality clashes, whether it's relationship bumps, whether it's job issues. Why are you always in conflict? Why are you creating chaos in your brain? Woohoo! Winner right here. Always creating chaos. So how do you help yourself out with that? Well, therapy can do that for you, whether it's big or small. Certain things can really start to get you. It's important to let out, and especially have someone unbiased in your life listening who might be able to show you the patterns of your behavior and thus performance enhance. That is where BetterHelp comes in. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. Today's show is also, isn't that nice when I get those little notifications? I've not got to figure out how to turn those off. I think you're hearing that. If you're not, you think I'm really weird right now. Today's show is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Get your ride or die taken care of with eBay Motors. eBay Motors, passion, drive, patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy. And eBay Motors has everything for you to get that with your ride or die and bring home that championship trophy as well. Speed, power, style, whatever it is that fires you up, eBay Motors has it covered with you for over 122 million parts for your ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and prices you want, it's easy to turn your ride into an MVP. Bring home the win with ebaymotors.com. Eligible items, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only for U.S. customers. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We'll play Orlando tomorrow. That game will be available for you on the SiriusXM as well as the Utah Jazz app and KSL Sports Zone. Jalen Johnson is fabulous right now for the Atlanta Hawks. And he's a 6'9", 220-pounder who played at Duke for 1 year, limited, played like 13 games. And the Hawks drafted him with the 20th pick of the draft. And in his opening year, he played 22 NBA games. He played 9 minutes a game in those 22 games. He played 120 minutes the entire year. That's a 0. Then last year, and if you've heard me talk about it, usually we talk about rookies as 800, 1,200, 1,600, 2,400 minute players. Like that's the goal. 2,400 minute gets to about 30 minutes a night. So you kind of go from 1,200, and then some go straight to 1,800, and some go straight to 2,400. Others go 1,200, like they go 1,200, and they go to like they kind of get a middle ground, and then they get to their 1,800, and then they maybe get to their 2,400. Well, Jalen Johnson went 120 his first year. Then he went to 1,000 minutes his second year in 70 games. He played 1,000 minutes over 70 games, so that's about 15 a night. And then when Quinn took over, he started to prosper. And now he's played, he's jumped from 5 minutes a night to 15 minutes a night to 34 minutes a night in his third season. He's averaging 16 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, shooting 52% from the field and 35% from three. Like, there's a lot of similarities to who he is and who Taylor Hendricks is. Jalen Johnson was the 11th biggest recruit in the country out of 2020 and then somehow slid to 20th in that draft. That's like the weird thing. And at 6'9", 220, how he slid to 20th in the draft is totally unclear to me. So he's obviously went to Duke. He was a much higher recruited player than Taylor was because Taylor went to Central Florida, but Taylor was at least, known. He was recruited by Florida State and Miami and others in that area. And Johnson comes in and he's just young and not ready. And now, he is just he's having a monster second half of the season. And so to me, it's kind of, we look around at some of these players who are similar to Taylor, and I think we begin to see this. First of all, it's just incredible to have that kind of, you can see it out of Taylor every night with 6'9", 210. Onyeka Okongwu is another one that's a little interesting. He was the 6th pick of the draft by the Atlanta Hawks in 2020. He has not stayed healthy enough. So he went to USC for a year at 19. He played a decent amount, had a very similar year to Taylor. Didn't shoot the three very well, didn't have that skill set, was thought to be a little bit more of a center, but at 6'8", 235, he's a little bit of a tweener. And he went his first year, he played 600 minutes. His next year, he played 1,000. The next year, he went to 1,800. Like, he was on the progression. Then he's been oft injured this year. And he's trying to add a three-point shot. He took 3 of them in the first 2 years, 13 last year, and now 65 this year. He has to change his game a little bit. but he's pretty crafty around the rim. He's supposed to be a good defensive player, but you're seeing kind of that progression of, I talked about 1,800, 1,600, 2,400, but obviously you're not going to hit those numbers and there's increments in the middle. So he was a 600,000, 1,800 minute progression. It's, we start to kind of look around. Jaden McDaniels is 6'9", 185. He was a 28th pick by Minnesota, which, again, mystery of why he slipped. He played, but at Washington, he was this all-offense, total blinders on player, and he's now kind of learned how to assimilate into a fifth man on a really good team. But he went from 1,500 minutes to 1,800 minutes to 2,400 minutes, and he's now in his fourth year, and he's now averaging, 10, 12 points a game, 3 or 4 rebounds and 2 assists. I think we probably want more out of that than Taylor, but that's pretty good. He's playing 30 minutes a night. So you start to look at Taylor here and what is his progression as a night? This is kind of big, long, 6'9", 210 guys. They get drafted early because the body's incredible, and they're probably not ready, and they have to progress. So Taylor, is currently having played 20 NBA games this year, is at 331 minutes. And if he does this for another, he's playing about 25 minutes a night. At 20 games, he's going to end up at about 800 minutes this year. It's kind of where he should be, 800, 1,600, 2,400 minutes. Jalen Johnson's a good model to look at for Taylor Hendricks. We'll keep doing this. I mean, I think the other one that we've talked about, and we'll just kind of continually keep an eye on whenever we see guys that can help us understand what we're seeing, is Jonathan Kuminga. And Kuminga was another one. He came out of G League Ignite, if I remember correctly. He's the 7th pick of the draft. He's 6'8", 210, so super similar. Doesn't have the outside shot at all that he has. But he goes and plays in his opening year 1,200 minutes. Then he goes to 1,400 minutes. And this year he's going to be probably in the range of 2,000. Like, he's following that progression fairly clearly. He doesn't have the same game. He's much more of a power game. Doesn't have the touch that Taylor has. Isn't quite as bouncy an athlete. But again, so Taylor's going to be at 800. He was at 1,200. Certainly that's further ahead. He also was playing with some better players. But he'll go 1,200, 1,400, and then this year he'll be at 2,000. Taylor will probably be around 800, 1,600, 2,400 minutes will likely be the progression that we see out of Taylor and start to click in by the third year. And that's when you hope he's Jalen Johnson, because Jalen Johnson is terrific right now. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. Thanks very much. We'll talk to you tomorrow from Orlando Disney World. Woohoo! Have a great day. Thanks very much for tuning into Locked On Jazz. We now send you to the first ever 24/7 sports channel on YouTube, Locked On Sports Today. It's also available on Amazon Fire TV. Check it out. Locked On Sports Today.